What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast, Talks Like Music, here on the Tastes Like Music YouTube channel. A couple notes. In the past two episodes, I've said that there's going to be an audio-only version of this, and as of this moment, there is still not. I've had some difficulties with our podcast host service. I think I might have to change things up, some technical difficulties that they've not been able to straighten out. So still working on that. Eventually there will be an audio version, and I will let everybody know, and all of the episodes will be up there when that happens. So thanks for hanging tight on that. I'm also really trying to stick to these being weekly and coming out on Thursday. But I've started a second job working at Hellbender Vinyl. Right now part-time. I think it may eventually become full-time, so we'll see. But so working multiple jobs right now, really busy. So we'll see if hopefully I can maintain. Obviously, if you watch this channel, you know that we often fall behind on things and don't stick to schedules. But there's a good chance that this isn't even coming out on Thursday. So we'll see. Doing my best there. Trying to make it weekly. It's hard to book guests and schedule guests and everything, so there may be gaps, weeks without episodes. Other than that, I don't know. How are people feeling about these intros? I'm not sure that they're helping the videos any. Performance-wise, people clicking and seeing just me talking for a few minutes might be better to just get into the interviews quickly, but let me know. I think maybe we'll try maybe doing some Q&A, so if you want to leave some questions for me, maybe I'll do that at the top of episodes. But yeah, trying to make this a little shorter today. I'll do the rundown of stuff I've listened to this past week. Red Medicine by Fugazi for the 95 deep dive, 2.5 stars. Also The Roots, Do You Want More, 2.5 stars. Then I actually have some stuff that's from neither the 95 deep dive or new releases. I went through the Mopachi discography and finished up the couple that I hadn't listened to there. 4 stars for Swinging Stars from 2023, 4 stars for Mopachi 3 from 2021, and 3.5 stars for their self-titled album 2017. Also rated the Improvement Movement record Slump from last year, 4 stars. Then I've got the new Sam Blasucci record, All Blue, at 4 stars. The much talked about new Turnstile record, Never Enough, at 3.5. Soft New Magic Dream by Black Moth Super Rainbow, 3.5. A surprisingly cool album from Finn Wolfhard, the star of Stranger Things, 4 stars there. Kind of lo-fi, slackery power pop. Enjoyed that quite a bit. It is pretty short, though, 25 minutes. Nick Mulvey, 3 stars. Attention Bird Utopia, 3 stars. Lifeguard, 3 stars. The new Pulp record, already reviewed on the channel, 4 stars. The band Options, the album Beast Mode, 3 stars. Love Made Trees by Loaded Honey at 3 stars. Keen Kavanaugh, the country star, 3 stars. Haley Witters, Corn Queen, a country record, 2.5 stars. Another Michael, their album from last year, 3.5 stars. Keep for Cheap at 3.5 stars as well. And the band Rehash and their new album called Mock, a strong 3.5 stars. Really love the first track on that record, though. So go check that out. All right, now we can get into the conversation that I had with Sloan's Jay Ferguson. Not to be confused with the other yacht rock Jay Ferguson. Jay is from the Canadian band Sloan, one of my favorite bands. I've talked about them a bunch on the channel in the past. But if you're not familiar, this is a good primer. We kind of go through the entire history of the band. And yeah, check it out. Here we go. So, what's up? Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Toronto, which is where I live. Where are you, Jason, by the way?
I am in Pittsburgh.
Oh,
PA.
Pittsburgh, right. Yeah, okay. And now did you t sorry, as you know, I play in the band Sloan. So did you play in a band that opened for us at one point? Is that what you
For
told me?
one night only, yes.
One night.
Um, yeah, I played in a band called Berlin Way, and we played one show. We opened for you at the Rex Theater. I don't know if you remember that place. It
That's
was
familiar, yeah.
the Double Cross tour.
Oh, it was the Double Cross tour. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So there was another band that I think was touring with you, and we were on before them.
Okay. All right.
And I had actually quit that band. Um, maybe I don't know how long before the Sloan show, maybe 6 months or so. And they
Wow.
had they
Okay.
had found a replacement, and the guy that replaced me wasn't available that night.
Okay.
And so it was very fortuitous that I got to play with them opening for one of my favorite bands, and so that was nice.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I'm glad you got to whatever. I was about to ask you, I was wondering if that was the first time you heard of our band, but maybe you had known our band before.
No, yeah, I was a longtime fan at that point,
Oh,
and
cool. Okay.
part of me even wonders if they were just, having me in because they knew that I
Right,
was
right,
that I was such
right.
a fan. But the story was at least that the other guy couldn't make it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, cool. Cool.
So yeah, we can go back. I actually my first time hearing Sloan, it was kind of an odd way to get into Sloan, but I'm
Mhm.
sure you've probably also heard this before from other people. The first Sloan that I heard was on the DGC Rarities comp.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that would have been the Stove Smother
Yeah, yeah, and I would
song.
have been 10, 11 years old. So
Okay.
that is to this
Yeah.
day one of my favorite comps of all time. I love it. So it was very formative, but having said that, the path from that to listening to the rest of your music, it took a while.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, I knew that I don't know how I knew this, but I knew that that was not like super representative of your whole catalog, and I knew that you guys were like more power pop, and that I would probably like you a lot. But this is like pre-streaming, so and I was 11, so I like didn't have the means to get more Sloan music, so I
Yeah.
didn't really start checking out your records until around the time of Never Hear the End of It.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So
Got
yeah,
it.
it took a while.
Okay, for sure. That's a good. I'd never hear the end of it. It's kind of a good era to come in on as well. But you're right. The that Stove Smother track that's on the DGC Rarities record was not indicative, and that was by the time no, I guess that would have come out around, gosh, 94, 95, around that era originally.
It
We
was a
originally
s- oh sorry, yeah. It was a
no,
split
you're
7 inch, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it was like the band Eric's Trip, who are a band or friends of ours from New Brunswick, the neighboring province to Nova Scotia. We did a split single where we covered each other. They covered a song of ours called Laying Blame. And originally we did sort of a hardcore punk version of one of their songs. And I remember just thinking it was a little, from my perspective or my taste, I thought it was a little too goofy sounding or something like that. And so I thought it'd be fun to do a version of the song Stove, but using a tape loop for it and piano and trying to make something be a little bit unexpected. And you're right, like coming after Smear, that's definitely not a normal. I mean, within our whole catalog, it's still not it's still a bit of an aberration, like an unusual track. But it was just fun to do that. And then I think, yeah, it came out as a split single, and then as you say, it was on the compilation. But yeah, that's an unusual song to use as a pathway into
Yeah,
our
very
band
fair.
for sure. Yeah, but I'm happy with it. I think it's cool. We actually played last November here in Toronto. We played our first album, Smeared, front to back, 2 nights in a row, and we did 2 sets each night. First set being Smeared, front to back, and the second set was kind of like B-sides and songs from our first EP as well. And we actually performed Stove Smother for
Oh
the very
wow.
first time. Or we performed Stove, I should say. We didn't really do the Smother part. Actually, we did play Smother, but we played it the way Eric's Trip played it, not the hardcore version that's on that collection. But that's the first time we had ever played that, so
I was
it's fun.
listening to it just this morning before getting
Oh,
on the
wow.
call with
Okay.
you. Just to,
Right
I was
on.
I was just going through some stuff and taking some notes, but
Okay. Does it hold up? Is it all right? Does it
it's
still
pretty
sound
cool.
good?
Yeah, it's
All
it's
right.
really different. The I was just thinking like this doesn't sound like Sloan at all, except do you know or do you remember does that piano show up in your discography? The piano sound kind of sounds like the same piano from one chord to another. The record.
You're right, but I don't think it is the same piano. That piano on Stove Smother was recorded in Andrew's bedroom at his parents' home in Halifax. I remember we were recording it and we did some of it in my bedroom. Patrick and I sang it in my bedroom. And then we went with Chris over to Andrew's house, woke him up. He was basically just like barely awake. And we recorded him playing the piano to that song. So it was just like an old piano in his house. But the one chord to another piano was done here in in Toronto. The majority of that record was recorded in Halifax, but Andrew recorded his songs here in Toronto. So, but you're right. They're both kind of old, rickety, upright pianos, so they do have a similar
Cool.
timbre. I guess is that the right word? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So our demographics, our viewership on this channel is pretty wide.
Hmm.
We've got, older classic rock heads,
Hmm.
and then people that are into like new stuff coming out
Hmm.
currently and
Yep. Yep.
all over the place geographically. So I thought for a large majority of the people listening may not know you or Sloan.
Sure.
So I thought we'd kind of go back um, to the beginning, talk about maybe some of your formative inspiration and the beginnings of the band and kind of walk through the career a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
So you guys formed, you're from Halifax, yes?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, born and raised. Everybody was kind of, I think I'm the only one that was born there, but we all grew up in Halifax, basically. Yeah.
And do you have any like early music memories, like first bands or things that you were into, or maybe that caught your ear that made you think that like music was what you were into?
I think the first time I thought music was I liked music as a kid growing up in the 70s. Whatever regular stuff like ABBA, and Trooper, like Trooper you might not know in the States, but just rock music. But I loved Kiss as a kid. Like that hit me, when Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun came out, I would have been, 8 years old or 7 years old. And it sort of was, I was the prime demographic for
Yeah,
Kiss. So that was exciting. And I was like, I want to play guitar like Ace Frehley. So that was something that made me think, it didn't make me think I'm going to be a musician, you know what I mean, for a career. But I loved that. And I really got more seriously into music, ironically, when John Lennon died. There was, I knew the Beatles. I had Sgt. Pepper's. I had that album. I had Band on the Run. And I think I might have had one other Beatles record, but they were kind of just randomly in my collection of like ABBA and Kiss records and stuff like that, but that I had as a kid and Bee Gees and stuff like that. But when John Lennon died, there was just, 24/7 Beatles music on the radio and everything. And I just became inundated with it. And that really opened a world to a real love of like going back and discovering, 60s music and then getting into the Stones and the Who and the Kinks and stuff like that. So that really forged a love of music. And I started working at a record store when I was quite young. But then I think the bands that really made me feel like, oh, maybe I could play in a band would have been some of the independent American stuff that was starting in the 80s or early to mid 80s, like REM or The Replacements and records like that. I'd read interviews with Peter Buck from REM, and he was like, yeah, I learned three chords and I made up five songs. And that was kind of inspiring. It was very do-it-yourself punk kind of aesthetic, but they weren't playing punk music,
right.
I thought punk music was fine, but I wasn't inspired enough to play in a punk band. But the fact that a band like REM or The Replacements were kind of using the do-it-yourself aesthetic, but playing music informed by, you know, Big Star or the Byrds or the Velvet Underground or things like that. They weren't, just about, anarchy and nihilistic and, 1 minute songs. They had a bit more, melody and a pop aesthetic. So that was when I really, I started playing guitar around then. So it was kind of that era that really, for me, formed or forged an idea that I'd love to play in a band or play music, and when you're a kid or you're a teenager, you fantasize, wouldn't this be great to do this for a living? But it was enough to want to play in local bands in Halifax. So that was kind of for me, that was the beginning. Everybody has their own version of that story, I think, in our band, but that would have been my inspiration for sure.
Well, we share the Kiss thing in common. So before DGC Rarities, there was Kiss. All my dad's Kiss records
Oh, right. Okay.
grabbed me big
Yeah.
time,
Cool.
and I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
he had a home taped VHS copy of Kiss on Night Flight. I don't know if that's a show you would have gotten up in Canada at all, but
Right.
um,
Wow.
that was like Vinnie Vincent era, but still
Okay.
makeup.
Right. Yeah. 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 Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah. I
Um,
kind I kind of dropped off by the time I guess Unmasked came out. It was kind of like the end of the Peter Criss era, and then I kind of dropped off. But yeah, I'm highly aware of Eric Carr and Vinnie Vincent as well for sure. Yeah.
my first guitar of my own was Ace's signature Epiphone Les Paul.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
I would have been very jealous of that. That's amazing.
Okay, so I think if you listen to early Sloan stuff,
Mm.
one thing people will probably notice is the shoegaze influence.
Yeah, for sure.
So when does that when do you shift from like REM and all that stuff into the kind of more fuzzy?
For sure. I've always, as well as loving the American sort of independent music scene in the 80s, which, like I said, REM replacements, also like Husker Du, the Minutemen, Meat Puppets, that all of that sort of stuff. I was also like an Anglophile. I loved British music, whether it was The Cure. The Smiths are still one of my, top five bands of all time. And uh, so I always kept up with British music, Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, a lot of the stuff from Manchester as well. And I remember hearing My Bloody Valentine for the first time right around the time Isn't Anything came out. And they really grabbed me, as well as all of the other stuff that was on Creation Records at the time. So for me, that was just an extension of the British music tradition, especially in the 80s, that I loved. And that My Bloody Valentine might be, the one band that I'd say our whole band, aside from Public Enemy and the Rolling Stones or something like that, is probably the one band that our whole band can agree on. And so everybody was really into Loveless, and a lot of the songs that made it onto our first album, we used to play them a lot more differently, maybe in more of a normal indie rock fashion, but I feel like Isn't Anything, and also like bands like Sonic Youth as well, with just sort of noisy guitars and the whole way My Bloody Valentine were writing songs and recording them and playing them. I think we just sort of looked at the music that we had and we started playing it with that style of guitar and noise and the harmonies that they used and everything like that. So it was almost like we took the songs we had and sort of put them into that My Bloody Valentine, Sonic Youth kind of a template. So that really developed once we heard Isn't Anything, and then especially Loveless for sure. So it was kind of right around that time that Sloan kind of began in early 1991, and Isn't Anything was already out, and Loveless came out that fall of 91, but as well as same as Nevermind and Bandwagon S by Teenage Fan Club, all which were influences. But yeah, in Canada we were thought we were given the tag as like Canada's Nirvana, just because Nirvana was the big story of a small band from a small town-ish, or not a music business town. And our band Sloan was from Halifax, almost like a similar story in Canada. So we were like Canada's grunge band, basically, or which I can understand why broad media would use that as a way to pigeonhole us. But I often thought of us as more of like ripping off
Yeah.
My Bloody Valentine more than Nirvana and things like that. But that was a super big influence for us in the early days for sure. And still, I still love those records, for sure.
Did you play in a lot of bands before Sloan?
Chris Murphy from our band and I, we played in a band called Carney Lake Road, and that was from 1987 to 1990. And that was more like I don't know. It kind of went through stages, but definitely like riff-based power trio kind of music. We like Led Zeppelin and things like that, but also things like the Minutemen coming out of the States. But we liked Isn't Anything at that time, but that didn't really make its way into Carney Lake Road. And then before that, I played in a band with some friends in high school, and we mostly played covers and stuff like that.
So it's clear that you had a lot of different influences, and I'm sure when you add in all the other band members, that's even more influences.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of interested in the way the band shifted away from the sound of Smeared into the
Hmm.
next couple of records. So I don't
Hmm.
think it. Sometimes you read about your records and it's kind of written about like it's like a hard left, and
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't see it that way as much. I think it's kind of a little bit more gradual, like slowly moving towards the more like classic pop writing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't how much of the changing on those records was like intentional or like considered.
I think it was a little bit considered. I feel like at the end of touring Smeared, which would have been, 1993, we were kind of, maybe not all of us, but for me, I was tired of playing so loud. And it just felt like in a post-Nirvana world, there was so many bands that were jumping on that noisy guitar bandwagon. And I kind of, from my perspective, I was more excited to try something new and not just uh make Smeared Part Two. The music that I was listening to, whether it was like the third album by the Velvet Underground or even like Fleetwood Mac Rumors and Rolling Stones records and things like that, it was maybe just a conscious effort to try and separate ourselves from the pack. When some people argue, I think maybe Patrick in our band is like, we should have made Twice Removed as our third or fourth record, and maybe our second album should have been another album more like Smeared, because I think Twice Removed in the United States didn't get the support that our first album got, because I think our record label thought it was just, well, you were this band on your first album, and then the second record you're a completely different band to our ear. So uh, maybe it was career suicide at that time. I don't know, but I'm happy in retrospect. I think Twice Removed is a great sounding record, but it was a conscious effort, I think, to stray away from loud guitars and try and just separate ourselves from what was like a glut of guitar bands in a post-Nirvana world, I thought.
Was Twice Removed received like immediately in Canada though? Like was it immediately because it's so hard as an American to tell
Hmm.
the level of any Canadian band's popularity in Canada.
Sure. Yeah. I think some people think we're an arena band in Canada, which is not really the case. Like we have a large fan base and we're lucky to be on the radio and everything like that. But at the time Twice Removed came out, Coax Me, the song on that album, was the single in Canada. And it got played on radio. We made a video for it that was shot in video to made to look like an old 60s TV show. And Much Music, which would be the equivalent of MTV in Canada, I remember they thought like, what is this? Like this looks so cheap and ridiculous. Like we're not going to play this. And I think if we had made a higher budget video, they would have been waiting for like a new Sloan single with a high budget video. We'll put it in high rotation. But because it looked a bit low budget or too unusual, it went into low rotation and didn't get a lot of support there. It got a bit of support at radio, but our Canadian record company, which would have been MCA Universal at the time, as they distributed Geffen Records up here, they were quite supportive of Sloan, and I think they put as much effort as they could into promoting the record. But in the States, it was a different story. I think Geffen wanted us. They heard Twice Removed, and they asked us to go re-record it, or either make another record or re-record it. And we decided not to, and they said, okay, we'll put it out, but don't expect much marketing because we don't believe in this. You know what I mean? I mean, they were just being frank, and they just thought, how can we build on what we started with Smeared? So it was more of a challenge, even though I think there's songs that would have fit well on whatever would have been, alternative radio at the time. And to me, like I think something like Crooked Rain by Pavement, I think that record came out around the same time. And I think some of the songwriting style and the type of recording is similar between Twice Removed and Crooked Rain to my ear. And yet Crooked Rain was this heralded, record by Pavement, but our record was considered, unmarketable. So it's a bit of a challenge at the time for sure. But yeah, in Canada, yeah, it was we did have more of a push, but it wasn't like a blockbuster or anything like that.
It seems like now, maybe I'm wrong about this, this is just my perception of reading things online,
Hmm.
that if you asked a Canadian Sloan fan today, like, what is the Sloan record, they would
Hmm.
say Twice Removed. It's like
Yeah.
named the number one Canadian album of all time by Chart Magazine. I don't know what
Hmm.
Chart Magazine is, but some guy named Bob
Yeah, yeah.
Messera wrote a book and named it the 14th best
Oh,
Canadian
yeah, Bob
record.
Mercero. Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, good
And that
guy.
and then
Thank you,
20,
Bob.
2015 it got the inaugural Slate Family Polaris Heritage Prize.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's got a reputation in Canada of being like a classic.
I think it's a good record. I love it. Like I still, it's one of my favorite Sloan records. I think it was also an underdog record because of the fact that it wasn't accepted in the United States. It didn't take off in Canada. I think probably the way that the second Sloan album was imagined that it would. And our band kind of broke up after that. So I think it's always had that underdog status of like a Sloan record that not like it's not like it was a hidden or a secret record. You know, the way that there are records that, hey, it's, only a few people know about it, therefore it's cool. I think there's an element of that, but I think it was still, it still went gold in Canada. So it wasn't like an obscure album or anything like that. But I think aside from the good music, I think there's just an underdog story to it that led a lot of people to champion it. So I don't know. I think that's just human nature. And I think that's what happened with that record.
Yeah, that's always been interesting to me is like being American and not really understanding what level of popularity any of your records had,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then also coming to you guys later and
Hmm.
not having been like listening to that at the time it was released.
Hmm.
It always just seemed like a slightly strange record to me. There's songs on it that I love, but to me it was like a stepping stone towards like from Smeared to the next couple records.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think one chord to another. Excuse me. Like I said, our band was kind of broken up after Twice Removed. And when we made one chord to another, we kind of thought that would be our last record. After we decided, like we took some time off and we thought, let's make one more record that we can put on our own label, Murder Records in Canada, because we had our own record label running concurrent to while we were on Geffen. We just weren't on our own record label in Canada. So we thought, let's make one more record on Murder Records, and that'll help make money for Murder Records, and we can work on Murder. It was almost like Murder Records was the focus for Chris and I, anyhow. Uh, and we made one chord to another, and we thought, like, oh, okay, well, we'll put it out on Murder Records Universal or MCA Records at the time, and then, oh, we should make a video for it. Then the video went into high rotation, and then The Good and Everyone started getting play on radio. And then, wow, it's starting to sell and people want us to tour. And then it just sort of snowballed and became our biggest selling record of all time. Ironically, for a record that we thought was going to be kind of like a token last record kind of thing. And yeah, we still play songs from that record to this. I mean, we still play songs from all our records, but that still is probably our most popular or one of our most popular records. And Navy Blues, the record that came after One Chord to Another, was, you know, the first record made with real, even more anticipation than Twice Removed because we had had such success with One Chord to Another. And One Chord to Another gave us another kick at the can in the United States. We signed to a label called The Enclave, run by a guy named Tom Zutot, who used to work at Geffen, and he left, started his own label. We signed to his label, and he gave us a big push, mainly because I think he was like, okay, Geffen didn't want this band. I'm gonna break this band in America. But then, of course, the Enclave went bankrupt in like,
Mm.
within a year, or he not bankrupt, but he lost all his backing from EMI, and that's another story. But anyhow, it was too bad that that happened because that would have been a uh, a great place to keep putting out records. But yeah.
What's the story, or is there a story as to why you guys did live at a Sloan Party? Because I absolutely love that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like we did that record mainly because it actually had to do with that label, The Enclave. One Chord to Another came out in 1996 in Canada, but by the time we signed with The Enclave in the States, One Chord to Another wasn't coming out till 1997. There were a lot of exported copies leaving Canada to the United States. To our real core Sloan fans, the United States were buying, Canadian copies. So I think the Enclave was worried, like, oh, okay, the small fan base that we had in the United States maybe already had One Chord to Another. So they wanted to have like an added bonus feature to One Chord to Another in the American copy. And originally they wanted to put a live record in. And I kind of thought it would be a great, being a fan of the Beach Boys, I thought, why don't we make a covers record? Let's mimic the Beach Boys party record and use that as a bonus thing. So that was the impetus, and then we recorded that for the most part in Halifax, and had a party where we recorded the crowd noise, and it was done in a studio, but the party atmosphere was added later, as a faux party record, and we just sort of covered old stuff. We covered Stereolab, covered Everly Brothers, covered Roxy music. It's kind of like all over the place.
The song selection's great. Your versions are great.
Thanks.
I love the faux party thing. I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
really
yeah.
lucky. Like I bought that I bought One Chord to Another used in
Okay.
probably like I don't know what year, 2000, and it was post Never Hear the End of It for sure.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, that the packaging on that folds open
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Sloan Party is loose in a sleeve
That's right.
inside of that. So for that to
Yeah.
still be included in the used copy that I found, otherwise I might not even know of its existence.
Right, right. Cool. Well, that's great that you found that. It's getting I mean, I think it can be found here and there, but it's not common for sure. So that's cool that you found a copy for sure. Yeah.
One of my favorite records is Between the Bridges, which probably
Mhm.
has my favorite song of Sloan's, and it's your track. Don't You Believe a Word?
Oh, really? Right on. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, just that's very like 70s. I can hear your like 70s upbringing in that track.
Sure, definitely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, that song is all right. Not too bad. Another song that we still play frequently to this day. I don't know what to say about it. I remember around that time I bought a Fender Rhodes piano. And so I was writing songs on that, and that would have been a song that sort of came about from playing, learning to play. Like I'm a hack of a piano player, so it's just like learning different chords on the piano, and that song just sort of emerged from that. And I don't know what the influence exactly would have been, but maybe a little bit of Todd Rundgren in there, a little bit. But it's got kind of a
Sure.
disco beat, I suppose. Um, but anyhow, I think eventually. Between the Bridges. We've been doing box sets as well of our albums, like like box sets of individual albums. And a lot of people have been asking about Between the Bridges, and I think we'll eventually do that. And I think there's some demo versions of Don't You Believe a Word that are kind of cool, like kind of rough sounding, but whatever. Just fodder for,
Yeah,
box
yeah.
sets and things like that. So that might be on the in the cards in the next few years for sure.
The next record, Pretty Together,
Hmm.
I've heard Chris say like some self-deprecating things about that record. Like
Okay.
I drove to Cleveland to see you guys once.
Oh, wow.
It would have been like hit and run.
Okay.
And I
Where
took
would
a
we
friend.
have been? Would that be at the grog shop
It was
probably?
at the
Or
grog shop, yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah.
And I took a friend with me who was less familiar with you guys. And at some point during the night, he like asked me what record a certain song you guys had played was on, and I like said what it was back to him, but it was loud, and so he misheard me, and he bought Pretty Together at the merch
Okay.
table,
Okay.
and we saw Chris after the show, and Chris was like, why did you buy this one?" Basically, and I wonder if you have any similar feelings or like why Chris or anybody would feel that that was like
I don't know. Maybe it was just like it was a transition era. It was the first record we made sort of in a digital realm, like on Pro Tools and things. All the records before that had primarily been made with tape. A little bit of ADAT, but I don't know. It was our first record. We left MCA Universal in Canada, and we sort of signed up with BMG in Canada. So it was like almost like a little bit of a rebirth or whatever, or a restart kind of thing. And I don't know. I'm not crazy about my own songs on that record. They're fine, but I don't know why Chris would have said that. I think sometimes that era, Pretty Together and Action Packed, our next record, are a little bit not necessarily maligned within the Sloan world, but maybe they're the least championed records, maybe, you know. I think there's going to be a Pretty Together and Action Packed renaissance coming around the corner. We'll see. But I'm just kidding. I doubt it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why Chris would have said that. And maybe he thought his song, what songs of Chris's are on that? Life of a Working Girl, that's a great one. I Love a Long Goodbye, that's one of Chris's best, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure why he would
I
have
think he said
said
something to
that.
the effect of like it's nobody's favorite Sloan record.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's true. But I also think that's true of Action Packed. Like I think a lot of people are actually, you know what? I think there are some people who really love Action Packed because it's so kind of stripped down in our catalog. There's no piano, there's no strings. It's just
It's the hard rock
guitar.
record, yeah.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. But I think you could take that apart as well. But yeah, but it's true. I think Pretty Together maybe is nobody's favorite. I'm sure. Leave a message in the comments if Pretty
Yes,
Together is your favorite. I want to talk to you.
for sure. Yeah, our comments are full like any opinion that's ever been had, someone in our comments has it. So
Okay, fair enough.
um yeah, the next record, Action Packed. Is that your only one with an outside producer
I
or
mean,
after?
kind of. Our second record, Twice Removed, was made with a guy named Jim Rondinelli, and he recorded "Girlfriend" by Matthew Sweet, and also did a record for The Odds, a Canadian pop rock band. But I think he might have done that before or after Twice Removed. I forget. But yeah, Tom Rothrock would have been almost like the first, if you don't count Rondinelli, like the first instance where we went with somebody, recorded demos with him in the room, and even made up songs with him in the room, none of which were that great, to be honest. But I feel like we're more of a songwriting band as opposed to a jamming kind of band. But Tom Rothrock came to Toronto and worked on demos with us, and then we all went to LA to his house and to his studio to make a record. So that's the one. Twice Removed, we did go away to New York to make that record, but this would have been the first one where you're really making it from the uh, the bottom up with a producer. We had lots and lots of demos and let him sort of choose the 12 to 15 songs to focus on and everything like that. So it was an unusual experiment. It was a worthwhile experiment because we didn't know let's try and make a record like that. We've had so much autonomy so far. Let's give the reins over to someone else and see what happens. And there's no Andrew songs on the record, so that makes it a little bit of a anomaly in our catalog. And for people watching this, they might not know since we're four members, everybody in the band sings and writes, kind of a la the Beatles or Kiss, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's the first time that Andrew didn't have uh, any songs that he wrote on the record. He doesn't sing. He sings a little bit on Smeared, and he wrote a few of those songs and had his hand in the songwriting. But Action Pack would have been the first one. So I think some people are not as fond of that record because they're without the Andrew songwriting ingredient. So
I really like Action Packed. It's not my
really.
favorite Sloan record, but
Mhm.
it's probably top five if I had
Oh
to
wow.
think
Okay.
about it. Yeah, I
Okay.
like it a lot. And
Okay.
I had read, I don't know if this is true or not, that it was like a last ditch effort to break in the States.
There's a little bit, yeah. So Sony BMG in Canada, who we signed with, they are BMG. The woman who's the president, a woman named Lisa Zabitnu, who we're still friends with, and who's a great woman in the music business in Canada. She had a good relationship with BMG in the States, and I think she was taking this record to them and putting a lot of money behind it and getting the Americans to put some money into it. to really try and use this as a calling card for Sloan in the United States. But in the end, the American music business, it's always a roll of the dice because that has nothing to do with music.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to do with money, but also there's people who work at record companies who are championing you one day and then they're gone the next. So there was like another bit of musical chairs happening in the States, and Action Pact didn't really get a push down there as well. Even though to me there are hit radio songs on there
Oh yeah.
if someone had spent some money and done something with it. So it's just the nature of the music business and kind of the luck of the draw a little bit. But you're right, it was made with a bit of eye on putting a fresh foot forward in the States for our band. Yeah.
So then after that, is this you guys build your own studio, or this is where your own studio comes into the picture right after Action Pack, kind of going into the next record, or
A little bit. Actually, the record before Pretty Together, we had sort of set up a studio in our practice space. It was a little ad hoc just because we sort of took it down and everything like that. But you're kind of right. We had a more permanent studio after Action Pact going into Never Hear the End of It as well. We had a kind of a singles compilation called A Side Wins that came out in the interim, and we recorded a couple of new songs for that, and that would have been done at the Sony BMG studios in Toronto. But going into Never Hear the End of It, that was all made at our practice space studio that became a more permanent fixture at that point. You're right.
is that still what you guys are using
No,
going
we
forward?
used for our last record called Steady. We recorded the drums there on a 4-track cassette, but the building that it was in, which was like a series of practice spaces and studios. Eventually, it was sold to an Australian megachurch, and they tore it down. So we essentially, for a little while, had no practice space nor recording studio. But our engineer, a guy named Ryan Haslett, who we've made a number of records, he took a lot of his own studio gear and put it in the basement of a house that he owns. So we often, for the new record that Sloan has just made, we recorded the drums in Chris's garage and then took the files and the tapes and we finished it in Ryan's home studio. So that's kind of our mode these days. But as far as rehearsing, we can rehearse in Chris's garage, and for a little while we were rehearsing in his eldest son's bedroom. That was that was the state of our practice studio these days.
So I was eventually going to get to it, but there is another Sloan record in the can. Is that
There is, yeah. So we just finished it and finished the artwork, and it looks like it'll be out in the end of or by the end of September this year, I
nice?
think. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Does it have a name? Is that still secret?
It does have a name. I don't know when this is going to air, and maybe I shouldn't say it because whatever, someone will get mad at me. But yeah, we have a name for it, but
Cool.
maybe I won't say it until in case someone yells at me.
That's fine. Um, okay, so then some of these other records coming up here. Never Hear the End of It is kind of a unique one.
Yeah.
30 tracks, a lot
Yeah.
of them interconnected and woven
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it really highlights the different input from the different band members. I think
Okay, cool.
a lot of your it's interesting that you have four unique songwriters, but I think your sound overall is very um, I don't want to say homogenous because that's like an insulting word, but
Uh Cohesive, is that what?
cohesive. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, right.
Like
Yeah.
Sloan has a sound, I think is what I'm trying to say. But
Yeah.
Never Hear the
Uh
End of It, I think is the most kind of like white album bouncing around that you guys have ever done.
Sure. And I appreciate you saying that it sort of holds together like that because I often feel like we're four different bands in one. But I like to think the one thing that ties it together are, um, excuse me, everybody singing on other people's songs. Like I feel like the harmony, which is, a unique blend, especially of Patrick and Chris, you know what I mean? That
Hmm.
blend that started back on Underwhelmed. Uh, is prevalent throughout the songs, and I think that you know that helps with what you're saying is like the Sloan sound, to my mind anyhow. But yeah, that was the kind of record, it was like after making Action Packed, which was more streamlined, it was kind of like let's just make a crazy record that has long songs, that has like songs that are under a minute but connected to another song, or songs that have like little mini suites in them and everything like that. It's the kind of it's a little bit of that. I know you said the White Album, and I'd also say like the second side of Abbey Road. Uh, I think for a band like us that writes melodic pop rock songs, what's the experimental, interesting thing that you can do within those parameters? I mean, sure, we could make a record like, you know, we can make a record like Kraftwerk or Can or something like that. But I don't think we're going to do that sort of thing. Like that would just seem a little silly. Let's take what we do best and put it into an experimental form. And the experimental way would be writing song fragments and connecting them together. And I find that's an interesting way of, instead of just writing regular 3.5 minute pop songs and put 12 of them together and that's it. I thought it was a cool way to show off what we do, but putting it into an unexpected format of connecting songs together. And like I said, longer songs, and there's a hardcore song on there as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
and then there's just acoustic songs or just like a simple piano song. And I love records with a lot of variety, and which is why I love things like the White Album, and records like that. But yeah, that was just kind of it was to me, it was the kind of record that we needed to make after Action Packed, and I'm glad we did. And I think it's, from what I hear from a lot of Sloan fans, it's a favorite of theirs, I think.
I think it's probably my favorite too. I mean,
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
it
Yeah.
is the record I came in on, and that's kind of cliche for that to be the one that is your favorite, but
Oh, but that makes sense too, for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks. Cool.
So then from there, you kind of go the opposite direction again, kind of pare it down for um, parallel play, which seems,
Yeah,
I
that
think, is like the forgotten record in the Sloan catalog.
it's funny you say that because I think that a little bit too. Like it didn't there wasn't a big single on it. The song Believe in Me was the Canadian radio song. And we toured behind it. But it was definitely, the beginning of a bit of a lower ebb for us in Canada. It was sorry, I've lost track of what record it would be. It's, ninth or 10th record somewhere in there, and it's hard keeping people's interest. And when you're on, I mean, we're now on our 14th record, and I'm glad that we're still here. And but yeah, it maybe at the time it wasn't thought of as much, but it seems like people ask for songs from that record, and I'm happy with the record from my perspective. I like the songs that I wrote on that record. I'm happy with the way that they turned out, and and I think all of Chris' songs are good, and Andrew's got cool. And Andrew has the most songs on that record. Actually, it's the only album that he's got the most tracks on. So I think that's kind of a cool record, and Patrick has some rockers, but yeah, I that's cool that you said, and it's interesting that you said that, and I feel like a couple other people have said that it's a little bit of the forgotten sort of lost child record in our catalog.
It's got another one of my favorite of your songs on it, which is Witch's Wand, which
Cool.
when we opened for you,
Yeah.
I don't think you played it during the set, but you played it during sound check, so I felt it was cool to see like a bonus track.
Oh wow. Okay, that's fun. Yeah, we would have been playing it still around that time. It's funny we didn't play it at the show, but it was always for me personally, it was always a hard range to sing in. Like it's not very high. It's hard to push your voice in it, so it's a bit lower. So sometimes I was like, oh, I don't want to sing that. Especially if I can't hear myself well, it was hard to do. So sometimes it got axed from the set list. But yeah, I have better in-ear monitors now. We should bring it back actually
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
set. I like that song, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. It was a good sort of piano rocker. So
yeah.
anyway, yeah.
It's interesting that you say that was the beginning of like a low ebb in Canada for you because I feel
Mm,
like with the next record, especially, it kind of started like I almost feel like over the last I don't know how long it's been since Double Cross, 14 years or whatever.
wow. Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
during this like last period
Hmm.
that your popularity in the States is maybe you're maybe as visible. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You're as visible as ever here.
I think that's interesting that you said that. I feel like there was another resurgence in interest in Sloan post. I think we've always had a good, underground fan base there that we can go and play major cities and, fill a club or, small place. Uh, but ever since Never Hear the End of It, there seemed to be a renewed interest in Sloan. And yeah, I think that's always been for me in Canada. Uh, the next album was the Double Cross, and I feel like we were playing to our smallest crowds by that point in Canada. But in the
Oh wow.
States, you're right, it was slowly going up and getting even better. Um, but I feel from my perspective in Canada, things started to turn around 2012 when we did our first album box set, which would have been for Twice Removed. We released that and we toured Twice Removed across Canada and in the States as well. And I feel like that really re-energized a portion of our fan base that, maybe they had Twice Removed and One Chord to Another and Navy Blues and, then they graduated from university and they're working and then they started having kids and they kind of dropped off from going shows. It almost seemed like I'm sort of making that up a little bit, but there seemed to be a fall off on that maybe original fan base. But by playing Twice Removed live and doing a box set, I think it re-energized some of the older fans who were like, "Oh my God, I gotta go. I loved Twice Removed when I was
Yeah, yeah.
16. I gotta go see that." And I feel that brought people back out and they were like, "Oh, you know what? I forgot. I like seeing Sloan live." And the next record that we did after that, I mean, sorry, maybe I'm getting ahead of
No,
myself
no,
here in
that's
your
fine.
trajectory, but like by the time, we had Commonwealth, that album, and that felt like that was doing better than Double Cross. Like it seemed like there were people coming back out. And then we did the same thing for One Chord to Another, box set, toured that, brought even more people out. So I feel like that kind of, I mean, I guess you would call it, nostalgia trip or something like that. But I feel like doing the reissues and leapfrogging them with new stuff, but then doing a reissue tour, I feel like it kind of energized the fan base again and brought a little more interest back into the new music that we were doing. Whereas I think maybe if we had kept making new music exclusively or touring new music exclusively after the Double Cross, we might have lost more fan base. Maybe not. Maybe it would have, ebb and flow. It might have flowed back up again. But I do feel like doing those box sets re-engaged us with a portion of the fan base that might have, dropped off a little bit for sure, But in the States, you're right. I think it was always slowly maintaining and continues to go up or maintain. I don't know exactly, but
Yeah, I mean, I think, just the internet has probably helped you here and having things like,
yep,
live radio sessions on YouTube and things that can be shared and passed around more easily than just like hearing you on the radio.
I agree. I think you're right. Yeah, for sure.
But also, to your point, I think there's natural ebbs and flows that every band has, but there's a reason that so many bands do like anniversary tours and things like that. I think,
Yeah,
of
for
course, they
sure.
have to help.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm reminded of like the Beach Boys in the early 70s. I'm a fan, so I've read about them, and they'd be playing a university to 350 people, or opening up for Elton John or opening for Chicago or something like that. And then they did the big, you know, like a greatest hits campaign by 1974, and then all of a sudden they could play their own arena shows again. But it's, for a band that you would imagine so big in the 1960s to be playing universities for 300 people, as well. And same with a band like the Bee Gees as well, had
Yeah.
that real big lull in the early 70s, So I've come to, I've accepted that, if you have a long career, it can't always be all highs, you know what I mean? So it's good.
So Commonwealth, the next record that you kind of
Mm,
touched on,
yeah.
is also unique in your catalog. It's a double record, and each
Mm,
songwriter takes a side.
hmm.
And I've often wondered, like, if you guys have ever thought about doing solo records and things like that. And Chris has some side projects and stuff. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Everyone's got their hands on other things, I'm sure. But
Hmm.
um, that's kind of maybe like your answer to people always asking you if you're going to do solo records.
You mean me personally
No, no,
or
no, just like the band.
generally?
Yeah, general.
Yeah, I think it was kind of the way to do. I mean, it's another kind of Kiss reference, the way the Kiss did those solo records, which were whatever. The joke is they were pressed. what are shipped gold and returned platinum.
Yeah.
There was so many of them out there in delete bins, but I think we sort of joked, oh, we could do that, but then we thought, oh, let's do it within the context of one double album. Everybody gets their own side. It's all together like that. So uh, I thought it was a cool concept, and I thought out of all the bands that are out there, we're one of the few bands that could actually do that because everybody sings and writes. And I thought I was happy with my side, and Chris's side was great. I kind of thought Patrick might have gone a little more like experimental and electronic on his side, but he sort of kept, a little more to his lane. And I thought Andrew's was great. It's just like one giant long song that's broken up into little mini songs, or it's like a suite. And I really thought his track was ambitious. And he had help from Chris and Gregory, our touring piano player. Uh, and I thought his side was just great. But I really love Commonwealth. It's one of my favorite Sloan records, and I think it's a successful and interesting experiment. As far as solo records, like I said, Chris has done records with his friends Matt and Mike under the band name Tons. Another thing called Anyway Gang. So he's kind of been part of collectives, I guess you could
Hmm.
say. And Patrick has this thing called Fuzzed Out, where he was releasing some solo music, and he did a couple of shows on his own. But and I don't know if Andrew's really done anything. I know he did some soundtrack work a long time ago, but yeah, that's kind of the extent of the solo stuff. We did solo shows during the pandemic online, and Chris plays solo concerts once in a while, acoustic, and whatever, just earns a little bit of extra money and downtime, it's
Yeah.
worthwhile. So yeah, so they we're lucky enough that there's a lot of different outlets for our band to express ourselves creatively without sounding corny, but and also earn a little bit of extra money. But we can always come back and do what we want within the context of Sloan as well.
Do you ever think about it, or is there a reason you haven't, or just haven't?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I just haven't really considered doing it for real. But yeah, I don't know.
All right, so just two more to talk about. There's 12
Yeah.
and the latest one, Steady.
Okay.
Um, any feelings about those or interesting?
That's hard. They're so close that it's hard
To
to.
me, they don't have like the concept of,
Mhm.
never hear the end of it or um, Commonwealth.
Sure.
So to me, it's just more Sloan doing what Sloan does, unless they do kind of have, some kind of underlying thing that I'm not aware of.
No, I think you are not being misled at all. They are kind of, yeah, records without. I mean, like you said, it's like, well, and also I would use that as a pull quote. Sloan doing what they do best. I think that would be a good ad. So thank you for saying that. I
Sure.
think they are just kind of like songs that we wrote and they're ready at the time, and we just made a 12-song record. And similarly with Steady, it's hard to look back on them and think, sort of assess them. I'm once again, personally, I like my songs on 12 and I like my songs on Steady. Steady was kind of fun. Excuse me, we went back to recording the drums on cassette, on a 4-track cassette again. And I thought that gave Steady a little bit of a unique sound, but I like them both because they're compact, and especially Steady, you know, around the 35-minute mark, 12 songs, compact kind of record, not bloated or overlong or anything. And I like Steady. I think there's a lot of great songs on it, and 12. I'd have to sit and look at the track list again, but I think there's lots of good ones on that as well. But yeah, once again, I don't have that. I don't have the benefit of distance to really sit and go like, oh, I can really
Yeah.
think of that within our catalog now. But
For
yeah,
for me, those records came like in the era of this YouTube channel where I've been listening to like insane amounts of music. And so I
okay,
haven't spent as much time with them as I
yeah,
have the rest of the back catalog.
sure.
But I've listened to them several times each, and I like them. I think they're good. I would give the edge to Steady though. I think it's a little
Mhm.
stronger, and the hooks are a little more memorable.
I think so too. I would give Steady the edge over 12 as well too, I think, for sure. Yeah.
Anything wild or different or weird about the as yet named upcoming record,
Sorry
or
about
is it more Sloan doing Sloan?
sorry about that. It's more Sloan doing Sloan, probably. Another, maybe it's part of a trilogy, you know what I mean? I'm trying
Yeah.
to think what would be different about this record. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely it's similar to Steady that I would say Chris has four songs and Andrew has two songs. It's another one
Okay.
like that. Um, but yeah, it's another combination of rockers and Chris's songs are great and Patrick's got some good ones. And yeah, I don't know what to, it's again, it's so fresh and I've listened to it so many times that I'm kind of almost tired of hearing it because we had to listen to the mixes and then
Yeah.
listen to the mastering and then like, oh, we changed a couple things and you're listening to everything. So I think I think if you liked Steady, and I think that fingers crossed that fans will like this record as well.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
that's the Sloan rundown. Is there anything else? You've got a YouTube channel now where you're talking about records, which is very cool. Did you want to talk about that at all, or I can point people there? We can link to it below.
Sure,
Is this
yeah.
something that you're think you're going to keep doing for a while, or just kind of
I think
passing?
so. It was something I've enjoyed, especially over the pandemic, discovering a lot of different YouTube channels. And a lot of the ones I was drawn to were ones about people who were into either collecting or even like ones about like refinishing vintage furniture and stuff like that. Like I found it uh, a fun pathway into people who have an interesting passion or whatever and who can speak to it in an interesting way. But of course, I would be directed towards music ones, and I thought there was a lot of cool ones about record collecting. And and I started following them, and then it sort of dawned on me. It's like, oh, maybe I should try something like that. I wonder if people would enjoy it. I have an Instagram account and occasionally I would post like, oh, look at these cool records I found at a record fair or something. And some of those posts I would get messages saying like, oh, that's cool. Can you do more of that? Some people were like, can you talk more about records or post records? And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that sort of led the idea that, oh, maybe some people would enjoy, a YouTube channel talking about records because I enjoy those styles of channels as well. So I kind of mulled it for a long time, and then I filmed one, but I didn't put it up for about a month. I was like, oh, I don't know. I was kind of embarrassed a little bit, or I was skeptical whether I should do it. And I did, and then I thought, okay, I went to WFMU Record Fair, which is in New York City, and I thought, oh, this would be a good one to do an introductory YouTube episode about. And I did it, and I got a lot of good response. And I thought, oh, I'll try a couple more. And it's slowly building, and I find, I've collected records since I was, 12 years old or so. And I enjoy talking about it. I like sharing information. I loved having like a radio show, a college radio show. Uh, and I like talking about it and I like engaging in conversations with people about those sort of things. And I've always loved collecting stuff. Uh, so I started it, and so far I've gotten some positive feedback. So I think I'll continue it for a little bit. So yeah, check it out if that's kind of your interest, seeing
Yeah.
me
Most of the
nerd
people
out on
watching, yeah.
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
might find it interesting. So I just talk about records that I like, cool stuff that I found recently, and just share the information and stuff. And it's a specific laneway, but hopefully people like it too.
Well, one thing I'm doing with this podcast is I'm asking every guest to give me one track of either like a smaller up and coming artist that people might not know about, or like something old and obscure, something that people can like go discover. And I'm gonna put it all have like a running playlist of all the guest suggestions. So
Okay.
do you have a track? I'm springing this on you, so it's
Oh gosh. There's so many. Gosh, I'm trying to think of something that would be there's so many different things I could think of. I'm trying to think of something that's kind of obscure. You know what? There's a friend of mine named Jay Arner who lives out in Vancouver, and He's released records under his own name and also as a duo under the name Energy Slime. Um, uh, with his partner Jessica. And years ago, he released a song called Bird of Prey, which is one I love that song. And I even wanted to cover it at one point. I even made a demo of it for fun, but
Oh, wow.
I never really, did a proper version of it. Um, I'm gonna nominate that song, "Bird of
Cool.
Prey" by Jay Arner. I think not a lot of people might know about the music that they've made, and I just think it's a great one. So I'll put that one out there for
Cool.
sure.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
put that on the playlist. Check it out. Is it on Spotify?
I Oh gosh, I believe it is.
Okay.
Uh, if it's not,
Let me look real quick.
no, you know what? It should because I think it's on his first album. Yep,
Yeah.
it's on Apple Music right here, so I'm sure it's going to be on Spotify as well. I'm sure I'll think of something as well, like another thing after this
Suppose
is over. But
if you want to email it to me, one of the other people I talked to cheated and did a couple, but it's in the spirit of sharing music. So if you want to send me a whole playlist, that's fine.
okay, all right. Well, I think I'll stick with that one for now. Anyhow, yeah, it's a good one.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all I got. Thanks for doing this. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think fans, I think will enjoy this conversation, and hopefully it'll serve as a primer for some newbies.
For sure. Yeah. Nice talking with you, Jason, and continued success on your channel. It's great stuff. It's good.
Thank you.